We are so happy and so fortunate to have Linda all the way from New York here to talk with you about her work, to explain the content and issues that she's discussing, and I will introduce her in just a moment. But I'd also like to let you know that there is a slightly different event happening. We have a performance in conjunction with the lecture tonight. So if you stick around to the end of the lecture, you'll have an opportunity to see some of our students who have worked out a performance routine in conjunction with the sculptural armor that Linda has executed for them to don tonight. So it'll be a little different, a little interesting. So make sure you hang out for that. If you could, we always forget this part. Could you reach in, grab that cell phone, turn the ringer to silent, turn it off for the duration of the exhibition? That would be wonderful. And that way we won't have any interruptions during the lecture tonight. Without too much further ado, I'd like to introduce Linda Stein. Linda, if you could come forward and let me tell them just a little bit about you, and then I'll let you do the filling in. Linda has her master's degree from the Pratt Institute and her bachelor's degree from Queens College, New York. She is a native New Yorker. She has had many exhibitions throughout the country, including several solo exhibitions at prestigious institutions such as the Bowgigan Art Gallery, is that correct? Mm-hmm. In Wilson College in Pennsylvania, Alexander Museum of Art, the Spiva Art Center, the Ford Gallery at Eastern Michigan University, and the Curtis Art Hall Gallery of the University of South Carolina Upstate, including many more that I will not list here tonight. But if you would help me in giving her a big coastal welcome.
Well, I'm honored to be here tonight. It's a great campus, and coming from New York, this weather is just summer to us. So I know it's a little colder than you usually have, but it's great to be here. I want to especially thank Jim Arendt for his efforts to make this happen today. He worked very hard, and we've gone back and forth so many times. I feel like we're family already. So I think we should have a hand, please, for Jim Arendt. And in addition, I want to thank Kendall Martin, who's back there, for really helping a great deal to make this a success. And Josh and Bill, who are taking video and photographs, thank you very much. And our performers, I'll read them off. Stand as you hear your name. Brantley Ivy, Jennifer Pagano, Miranda Frederick, Sarah Cataldo, Taylor Wright, Tyler Kelly, and involved also was Nathan Smith, Connor Kendall, Krista Gerlach, Julie Clark, Gabriel Harker, Kona DeVoe, and Michaela Rivers. Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. So tonight, in a half hour or so collage of ideas, I'd like to take us beyond my art, beyond my nonprofit, Have Art Will Travel, though I'll come back to them both now and again. Have Art Will Travel has an acronym of HEART. And I'd like to address sex and gender in a global as well as a local and personal context. And I'll tie them into the theme of courage. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I'd like very much for you to interact with me so I don't feel so alone up here. So if I ask questions, if you could yell out yay, nay, or maybe, that would be terrific. So to start, raise your hand if you're an art major here at the school. Oh, okay, lots. Non-art major, another major. What's your major? Okay, what's your major? Yell out some majors. Biology. Okay, biology. Archaeology. What else?
Philosophy.
Philosophy. Oh, we need some philosophers, definitely. Any others? Okay, how about if you're faculty or staff at the college? Could you raise your hand? Okay, great. And are there any community members that are not related to the college at all? Great. That's terrific. So, you see a woman in the boxing ring, a metaphor for scrambling gender in terms of masculinity and femininity. I created this event called the Fluidity of Gender, and it consists of an exhibition, a performance, and a lecture. And it travels around the country, as you've heard, under the umbrella of Have Art Will Travel. My art is integrated with gender justice and with bullying and bigotry and all forms of intolerance. You'll see how this combination of art and activism blended at, say, the Alexandria Museum, and I'll show you a clip from that, and in future events we'll have clips from your school.
At KALB.com.
You know those signs at the museum, don't touch the arts? Well, tonight, you can. Fluidity of gender is the theme at this exhibit at the Alexandria Museum of Art. The sculptures by artist Stein feature larger-than-life figures of black leather, and tonight, the artist herself will be there to give a lecture on the work, which she says was inspired by the original Wonder Woman comics. After the lecture, local performers and audience members are invited to try on the pieces.
And you are invited.
She's appropriated this form as icons of strength, power, and compassion, and a way to address gender stereotypes and asking people just to break out of those social constrictions.
I always loved Wonder Woman Dale.
And I loved Wonder Woman too. So we're going to fuse art and gender justice facts today, and we'll review some terms, many of which you already know, starting with sex, biological sex, a type of physical body that you're usually but not always born with. Gender identity, that's a social and psychological identity. And gender presentation or expression, that's how you demonstrate your gender. And then there's sexual orientation, which may have nothing to do with any of the three before, and that's who you're attracted to. And feminism, I simply mean it to be equal pay for equal work, which means equal opportunity for all, and that means freedom from bigotry. In short, respect for difference. I'll interchange the words man and male and woman and female today, but keep in mind, these are changing so as we speak. And what was a definition for these words before is no longer the same definition. So with so much diversity right here in this room amongst all of us now, with people having traits everywhere between the opposite definitions of masculinity and femininity, I hope some of you will speak up at the Q&A following this lecture. And if not, I hope you can email me. I'd love to hear from you, and I promise to answer every email. So progress for gender justice is being made. We see females, though, as well as males, who bought into bullying in a big way, especially involving gender. Bullying by women, as well as men now, needs much more discussion. Do you discuss it here? Is bullying, bullying is being discussed a lot all around the country, but do you discuss it here at all? Just shout out a yes or no, or do you discuss it with friends or teachers or clergy or anywhere? Yeah? Okay. Some of you may relate to my personal history now. I'm going to let it all hang out, seen through a lens of gender, expectations, and limitations. My self-identification is fluid, which means it evolves. But today, at this second, I can't count for the next few seconds, I identify as a member of society, a human being, female, Caucasian, lesbian, androgynous, a Jew, a pacifist, a feminist activist artist addressing issues concerning the roles of strength, power, and justice in contemporary culture. how would you define yourselves at this moment? I won't ask you to say it out loud, but think. It's really a tough question. I see how profoundly gender stereotypes have affected me and the way people relate to each other. And I now can't separate my art from my politics from my life. So what defines bravery? What makes a hero? Is it only about physical strength and war making? Is this changing? Are men still putting down women so they could feel stronger? This brings to mind a great video game, or not so great, depending, called Grand Theft Auto. You've heard of that one, right? So, having seen that a bunch of times, one asks, do men need to debase women and objectify them in order to feel masculine? And it's still the most popular video game where you can increase your credits by paying for a prostitute and having sex with her, and then you get your money back if you kill her. Nice thing to teach your children, but here's a bit of the video game. So we're talking about armor today, and I'd like you to think about the armor that you wear, the protection you need, the safety you seek, that we all seek. And in thinking about that, this becomes my idea of courage. And one would ask, what would your idea be? Would it look like this? Or maybe tonight when you get home, you could think or write or sketch something if you want, and even enter it into the Have Art Will Travel contest, which I could tell you about later. And if you email me, I'll write back comments. So importantly, are men and women realizing that to victimize someone less strong is cowardly? Are we seeing less sexual abuse and fewer rapes? Nope. Society, our own society, is a bullying society in so many ways. Bob Herbert in his newspaper column asks us to try to imagine how bizarre it is that women in American uniforms who endure all the stresses related to serving in combat zones have to also worry about defending themselves against rapists wearing the same uniform and lining up in formation right beside them. I think you know this statistic, but do you know this one? And for the many artists out there, anecdotal research finds female artists earn 10 to 30% of what male artists earn from their art. And many female artists are afraid that if they tackle gender issues or feminism, they'll be ostracized. And I say, with figures like 10 to 30%, how much more ostracized can we be? So we could talk more about that, and you could even be a state representative. There are forms in the back there. We didn't put one on each of your seats, but if you could fill them out, even anonymously, we could talk more about statistics like this. And you could join tweet chats like some that are on new pop culture heroes that come up. The Burqa Avenger is one. Hort is, Have Art Will Travel is there with conference calls and tweet chats. And venue representatives take charge in this. In our last one, we discussed the Burqa Avenger, a Pakistani TV series. Anybody hear of that one? It's relatively new, started in Pakistan, and it created quite a sensation in terms of whether a woman really could be a superhero and free when wearing the burqa. And the conversation that took place around that was very interesting. And people from different parts of the world actually were involved, and some were wearing headscarves or burqas and said, hey, compare it to your American women wearing the bikini. Is that free? So it was kind of interesting in terms of identity. We talked about the incident with the high school football players in Steubenville, Ohio. And I don't know, did you hear about that incident last August, I think it was, a year ago August, where the guys allegedly repeatedly raped an unconscious 16-year-old and carried her around from party to party like a sack of potatoes. The question I'm raising is, why did no one stick up for her at the time? People protested after word got out about the crime, but why was there no hero at the scene, no one who stood up for this victim? A bystander with the guts to be what we call now an upstander. I like to think of the 4 B's: the bully, bullied, bystander, and then there's the brave upstander, the one who stands up for the victim. Hart's goal is to find, educate, and develop tomorrow's brave upstanders, using art as a vehicle to get the point across. And an interesting point that Hart found was that women don't ask anywhere nearly as much as men. And we'll see in our Q&A after this. They own almost 1/3 of the businesses in this country, but receive less than 10% from investors. Men submit 80 to 90% of potential opinion columns in national newspapers. And I even wrote a letter to the editor complaining about how every letter that was published was almost all written by men, but that letter never got published. But the biggest problem is that women don't seem to ask for very much. I go back and forth between being hopeful and glum about our prospects, and I'm hopeful because I do see more media coverage of women's issues. But there's reports that say that even with more coverage, only 11% of major magazines feature women on the covers of their magazines. There's good news, I know, including our 2 newest Supreme Court justices that joined Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and now we have Janet Yellen, who's the chief of the Federal Reserve Board, which is considered one of the most powerful positions in the world. But progress is painfully slow. It's still 20% or less female. And get this, transgender male to female earn 32% less after their transition to women, while female to male earn 1.5% more. And this prejudice works against men too, because I'm in this game both for men and women. And 4 decades ago, when presidential nominee Ed Muskie got teary-eyed on camera, that was the end of his presidential campaign. Crying was just not manly, and in still cases, and still in some cases, still is not manly. So the question is, what are we doing to our men so that they're not able to express emotions and vulnerability and be whole people? At least in 2008, VP nominee Joe Biden teared up talking about his former wife's death, and people credited him with authenticity. And you may know Speaker Boehner seems to cry at the drop of a hat, but that's progress. That's gender fluidity. So my point is that gender fluidity will help all sexes. Men will be able to show vulnerability. They won't have to always play the manly role, strong and tough. They'll be able to ask for help from a doctor when they're not feeling well, more often than they do. They'll be able to actually live longer. And they'll even be able to ask for driving directions when they're lost. And they'll listen more. And women can be real in who they are. Anyone here know women and girls who act weaker than they really are to seem more feminine? You know, who just are afraid to admit to being as smart or strong or athletic or capable as they are. I see some heads shaking. So Hort has conducted interviews and finds that many females still hide or play down their degrees and high-powered positions in front of boys and men. I ask you, are men's egos so fragile that they can't be with smart women? I bet there are many people in this audience who might admit to yourselves, if not to the rest of us, to having acted out this scenario, including me. So here I'll bring in the story of a little girl, a little Linda on the beach, throwing the ball, as my father would say, like a boy. And perhaps this is how I was drawn into the topic of gender. I was very athletic as a kid, but I learned that to be popular with the boys, I had to hide my strengths. So early on, I taught myself to throw the bowling ball into the alley gutter and hit the ping pong or tennis ball into the net. So the boy always won. I kid you not, this is what I did as a kid. Any of you, male or female, have experience with this syndrome from any end? I won't question you further, but sitting across from a boy on a first date, I would say a variation of, "Wow, you're a plumber. Tell me about it. What do you do with faucets and drains?" This is what I thought I had to do to be feminine, and what I thought I had to do to help the boy be masculine. Now, we're about to see Tina Fey in 30 Rock, who must have gone through exactly what I went through, because here she is on a first date.
So I should probably warn you, I was a pro college. What? Yeah, I started teaching kids at the Y, and then all the mothers would take private lessons probably. That was something easy.
I didn't write this scene, I promise. She says to him. And we're about to see her having a heart-to-heart talk with her boyfriend, and he assures her he wants her to play her best and be totally honest with her.
Well, I don't live that way. I don't usually live that way. Are you sure? Yeah, Liz, I'm an adult. You can be honest with me, I can take it.
So she is, and here's what happens. And I didn't write this part either. Tina Fey from 30 Rock. Happily, Stephanie Kuntz wrote a great book and reported that men are beginning to like women with smarts and abilities, and that's terrific. And Have Art Will Travel wants this trend to be acknowledged, discussed, and continued. So I've come some distance with this syndrome. Whoops, let's see if we could get, and maybe you could see it kind of inspires my art. Oh, I see that thing was up that whole time. I should have looked at the screen. So, speaking of sports, statistics tell the story. Before Title IX was passed, far fewer girls played sports than boys. After Title IX, the number of girls soared. What a difference a law makes. And there's been some progress for women artists, including a show called WAC in California and one called Global Feminisms at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. But for women artists, and I know this audience is mainly artists, For women artists seeking gallery representation, it's still mostly the Old Boys Network. Have Art Will Travel researched and found glaring statistics in the art world. Get this, less than 1/3 of Chelsea solo shows feature women, Chelsea being the hot gallery area in New York. Many of the blue chip galleries still show 80% or more male artists. Justice is still gendered. So let's think about this for a moment. Let's think of all the chances we have in a day to show bravery, stand up for ourselves or someone else in the crowd. And it happens all over the world. In Afghanistan, when a little girl walks to school, in spite of the fear of having acid thrown in her face for her unfeminine desire to be educated. Or when an Iranian woman marches in the street to protest the rule that she's property and must have sex with her husband anytime he wants it or face punishment. Or say when Ann Dunham, a white Kansas-born anthropologist, dares to journey to Indonesia where she courageously makes a new home as a single mother for her son, who is now our president. Bravery is not the lack of fear, it's proceeding in spite of it. It happens when you face a new white canvas or a new job or a new school. And I'll use art terms now a little bit, but please replace the art terms with whatever your field is, philosophy, science, education, whatever. Bravery happens when you walk into a gallery, knowing that once again you're going to face rejection, probably, and you say to the dealer anyway, I'd like you to see my drawings, or music, or dance, or acting. What courage it takes to keep asking and probably face this rejection again and again. And I like to think, wouldn't it be great if it were how many rejections you had in a day? And so the conversation would go something like, how'd it go today, sweetie? Oh, great, honey. I had 18 rejections today, twice as many as I dared to have yesterday. That takes courage. It happens for me, perhaps for you too, when you go against the tide in the art world or any tide, when you create a body of work that's counter to the mainstream, against the crowd. We're brave when we go out on a limb and experiment with new materials and perhaps work with new tools or new people. So I'm pleased that many parts of my life are coming together for me now, my strengths and my vulnerabilities, and I admit to them both. And they're coalescing for me in my art, and perhaps that's happening for you somewhat in your lives, and you're bringing together different parts of your life together. And it takes quiet time for these things to become juice, to flow, to ponder these things. You can't be creative unless you have an expanse of time with no outside pressures. It's hard to squeeze creativity into an hour between classes or appointments. You know that, but sometimes we forget and we think, okay, you got 15 minutes now, create something. It usually doesn't work that way. We need the space to wind down from our last activity, to maybe sharpen pencils for a while, sort papers or brushes, and allow our brains to focus in on these passions. And maybe then we'll start hearing an inner voice saying, maybe, you didn't quite do it right this time, whether it's a sculpture or a paper or a dance. You didn't do it quite right, but now you'll know what to do next time. So each experiment not only helps us solve problems, but also raises questions for our next try and makes us look forward to it, to strive to take on a greater challenge, to be more daring, more courageous tomorrow in our next attempt. So I've been involved with this theme of protection for the last 3 decades, but it didn't occur to me until after running for an entire day during 9/11, seeking safety and protection. And a year after 9/11, my work, which was then currently abstract, slowly became vertical, and I began a new motif. And it was a figure kind of looking like a suit of armor, so I started calling it Knights with a K. But in bewilderment, I stared at my own work. My finished torsos, I saw them as strong, archaic, protective, like gods and shields, yes, but I was startled to see that they included a femaleness about them. Slowly, I seemed to be fortifying a castle cadre of knights and kind of stockpiling and brandishing the female as superhero. From the trenches of my studio, I like to think, I was honoring the female as defender. I certainly wasn't aware of it at the time. Almost everyone asked me that question. But I was aware of wondering how I was creating warrior types when I longed for an end to all wars. Is there any precedent in our culture, I asked myself, for a protector who is not a killer? That's where Wonder Woman came in. And you could see the video, you know, here she is right now on the screen. The media keeps bringing her back because she's strong, brave, and protective. Hort refers to these qualities in speaking about gender fluidity because it admires these qualities. So she became a hero for me at a time when women were seen only as damsels in distress. Even during 9/11, there were many ground zero female first responders, but the press didn't highlight them the way they did the men. So my sculpture imagines a corrective to this cultural bias of protector as male only. It doesn't exclude the male, it just includes the female, and imagines the ideal male as being able to show sensitivity and softness. As an artist, this is how I express the fluidity of gender, how I try to spark the viewer's imagination to what? To find that personal place, to feel a most authentic self. That's what we're after, isn't it? A feeling of our own authenticity. For female role models, I look to Lisbeth Salander from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Storm from comic books, Wonder Woman as depicted in 1941 to 47, and Lady Gaga, who needs no introduction at all. Salander, I believe, adds much to our study of gender and empowerment. And Storm combines superpower and compassion. And Wonder Woman is as good as pop culture gets for a superhero who never kills. And Gaga just awes us with her spectacles of activism, calling for us to all think for ourselves. So my art's about identity. I feel that my role is to unhinge, break up, overturn, scramble, change, alter the binaries of stereotyping, to inspire the viewer to find the courage to break these molds and free us all, male, intersex, female, in the process. My work has mainly been androgynous to me, honestly. Some may seem more feminine, some more masculine, but mainly art becomes a realm for me to ponder difficult emotions and explore ideas collaborating with others, such as Karen Jones Meadows. My art gives me a chance to keep experimenting and keep asking questions and keep offering new ways of expression. where participants can body swap genders, where men and women and all gender identities in between can explore. And many like to wear new outfits, avatars, and touch themselves while wearing them. Touch and be touched. That's what Have Art Will Travel and I am after. With males embracing their softer side and females feeling their strength. So eventually students began calling these body swapping events Stein gigs. Gig for gender improvisational gathering. And you'll see a Stein gig right after my talk in the Q&A. Filming people as they transcend the stereotypes of gender makes me think of all the emails I received after kicking Borat out of my studio when disguised, you know, he was this Kazakhstan reporter. How many saw Borat? Did you see the film Borat? So he was disguised as this Kazakhstan reporter and filmed me for what I thought was a documentary to help third world women. That's how they billed it to me. This was something which would definitely not be seen in America. So here's a segment from it.
So what that means is feminism. Give me a smile, baby. Why in your face?
Well, what you're saying is very demeaning. Do you know the word demeaning?
No.
We are saying...
Last night I see in a hotel room a woman called CJ on the television. Do you know her?
No.
Listen, pussycat, smile a bit.
Okay, I'm done.
So that was it. Actually, he interviewed me for something like an hour and a half or something like that, and I threw him out twice. And the producer came over. There were 8 video men and a producer, and the producer came over and said, "Linda, please give him another chance. He doesn't know how to talk to American women." And he went over to him and said, "Bharat, you have to show respect for American women." And Bharat shook his head. And after it was over, I didn't know what was happening. Somebody called me and said that you're in a trailer, Linda. So I looked out the window and I was looking for this truck. But it was interesting because in email after email from men, and mostly it was the men who emailed me, they asked the same question. And they said, why don't feminists have any sense of humor about misogyny? About misogyny. I mean, it's like saying, why don't African Americans have any sense of humor about slavery? Or, you know, I mean, it was just amazing. And actually in his movie, Sacha Baron Cohen invited men to feel okay about their hostility to women. In an article, Tom Bergeron writes about Susan Boyle. Do you know that singer, Susan Boyle? She was on Britain's Got Talent, a contest. And Bergeron ends his column about her, as I'll end my talk today, by saying the real problem is that too often we don't have the courage to sustain wonder. The courage to sustain wonder, I love that thought. So we have wonder, wondering, curiosity, questioning, asking, openness, and acceptance of the other. Many times the questions are more important than the answers. And sometimes there really are no answers, are there? No definitive right and wrong. So Susan Boyle walked onto that stage and faced down what Bergeron called a sea of smug. No one thought she would succeed. But if you know her work, her albums are selling magnificently. How many know Susan Boyle's albums? Okay. So we need more of that kind of courage today. We need the courage to believe that stirring voices can be found in unlikely places and people that you ordinarily would pass by and not give a chance. So shoot for the moon, I say. Go for the best gallery, the best publisher, the best job you can imagine, and be prepared to face rejection after rejection. Because they say that you have to make 100 cold calls for every 2 prospects. Not even successes, but for every 2 prospects, you have to make 100 cold calls. So get those 98 rejections under your belt and wear them as badges of honor and courage. Susan Boyle had made the most of her chance to be brave with her courage to dare, and here's hoping you and I will also. And to that end, we need to speak out and ask questions of ourselves and others. And I'm here now so that we could ask some questions and make some comments. So let's begin. Thank you. Sorry about that little thing in the upper left-hand corner. So let's just take a few minutes. Was there one question that I thought there was someone kind of in the back, maybe one of the dancers? A fellow, one of the dancers in the back? Okay, who's going to be the first brave one? Do we have a comment or a question? Yes.
Okay, mine has to do with materials. Where do you accumulate all this leather from?
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, so here's what happens. A number of things happen. Friends come to the house for dinner, and they may bring a bottle of wine, but even more important than the bottle of wine, they'll bring an old belt that they can't wear anymore, or leather boots that don't fit, or they'll go to the beach and bring me a big stick. So it comes from there. It comes from, as I go around the country, I find all these little secondhand stores, and I go in and I find commemorative spoons. You're going to see in here and up there little spoons that I buy for $1 a piece. And sometimes I cut off the spoon part and just keep the shaft part and then add them to my sculpture. Or somebody came, I remember it was Meredith who came and brought me these. They look like bullets, and I was excited to have them as bullets, but who knows what they are. They're salsa canisters from salsa bottles. I don't know how it works, but they make the salsa come out. So that was very exciting, and it felt like bullets, and it had to do with strength. So as you walk around and see all the things that are in my sculpture, just know that usually either my head was looking down at the ground or at some little dollar store where I could, or garage sales are terrific. So that's where they came from. Anyone else? I saw another hand. Yes?
I just want to know how you go through the process of creating the sculptures, like the armatures and attaching.
Okay, well, there are actually a couple of different ways. Usually I start with wood or a paper cast. I cast the paper so I have something firm in the back. But in some of the cases, like this one, actually I was thinking, many times I think about how they're going to travel as well. So I tried this one so that it would fold in 3, so that it could travel easily. So the top part has firm backing, the bottom part, say from here down, has firm backing, but the middle part doesn't, so it could fold. In the torsos around the room, they are cast paper. So they're lightweight, and then the leather is added over it. But you know, even though as I'm saying the leather is added over it, it feels to me like it's skin. So I don't see it as a doohickey that's applied after. It all becomes blended together as if it were a new skin. And that's what feels most right to me. What else? Any other questions? What do you think of this whole gender business? Let me get your question first. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mallory.
Allery?
Mallory, yes.
Mallory, okay. This one?
Yes, it's kind of like I can relate to it. Is
Okay.
there any piece of art that you like, really relate to more? Like,
Yes, I agree with you. And you know how you know I agree with you? And I'm going to take a picture of this fabulous room right now. I chose it, and others have chosen it for the front of my catalog. So usually the pieces that are front and back are the pieces I like best. What else? Any other question? Anything related to the topic of gender and bullying? You know, it's such an important topic for me. Yes, Jim.
Slightly loaded question. You are very generous in your treatment of the behavior of men and welcoming to kind of new structures of masculinity. Was it hard to come to that type of realization?
I'm generous? Oh, thank you. I'm glad, because, you know, sometimes as I give this talk, I'm afraid, oh, am I going to alienate men? And that's not what I want to do at all, because I think men have a bad rap here. And life is hard being a man. It's hard being a woman, and it's hard being a man, the way it's set up. So I feel for the men. And I feel for the fact that in some cases they don't know whether to open the door for the woman or not open the door, you know, where they, and they have to have this rigid armor. And there was one fellow that worked for me at one time, and I'll never forget, his name was Matt. And Matt said to me, you know, Linda, I discovered that if I just talk forceful enough and act like I know the answer, everybody, especially women, believe you. And, you know, so he just developed this way of talking, and he felt that was manly. And it's, you know, so you got to feel sorry for someone that can't just say, you know, I don't know, what do you think? And many times men are put in a box, and sometimes women put them in a box too. So it isn't just the fault of boys and men, because they want their men to be strong and manly. But you see, you can't have a whole person when you insist that the person just be one way. Yes?
My question is concerning armor in a different way. All of this these armored figures are rather sexy, actually.
Oh, good.
But
I like them sexy.
I'm concerned about armor, particularly in cases where people have been abused. And so they may tend to be obese in building armor, and it's not pretty, but it serves a purpose.
Be obese?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
So they build armor, they build
as a protection.
Yes.
But not this kind of armor. It's not necessarily considered sexy. As a matter of fact, probably unconsciously, they don't want it to be sexy because they don't want to call attention to themselves.
Yes, yes. But we armor ourselves in lots of different ways.
Of course, yeah.
One might be being big. I knew one woman who was very small. She was about 5'1", and very thin, and she would buy jackets that were 4 times her size because she wanted to be big and wanted to be armored in a sense. But there are people that armor themselves in the way they talk, the way this Matt spoke. And there are people that armor themselves in the way they walk, you know, maybe they could use intellectual armor, or they come on as being so highfalutin or something in order to protect themselves. So I agree that may or may not be one way of armoring, but there's so many. And I think with this bullying thing, I just want to tell you just this quick story of how I realized in talking about this that I was a bully in the 8th grade. And in wanting to be popular, you know, as all of us want to be popular, I was standing around the junior high school with 4 girls that were the popular kids on campus, and I was so glad just to be standing with them. And they decided they were going to have an I Hate Carol club. This new kid, Carol, that came to the school, and she had red hair and freckles, but she was a nice kid. But they decided they were going to have an I Hate Carol club. And so they took grass and we picked straws, so to speak, as to who would be the president of the I Hate Carol club. And I won. And I'm ashamed to admit to you that I was thrilled that I was the president. I had never been president of anything before, and here I was the president. But I didn't know what it meant, really, or I wasn't taught by anyone. No one said to me, you know, don't put people down like that. Don't make fun of people. Go out and, you know, help that person a little bit. Nobody said that to me. So I was president of the I Hate Carol Club. And as I'm talking about this, it came to my consciousness. I felt so guilty that I looked her up on Facebook. I looked her up everywhere. And after something like 2 years, I found Carol and found her in California. And somebody said, I know her. My husband is in touch with her husband or something. I said, please give me her telephone number. And I called Carol up. And I said, Carol, I just want to apologize to you. I'm so sorry for having bullied you. And she said, yes, I remember being bullied. I don't remember you doing it. And I don't remember an I Hate Carol club. But I do remember this other kid burned her picture in effigy. I mean, that's what we did. I don't remember burning the picture, but she did. And she said, you know, right after I graduated college, I went into therapy. And the first thing I talked about was being bullied. And the therapist said, and I think he was very unprofessional and stupid, I'm going to say, said, what did you do, Carol, to make them so angry at you? And I said, oh, Carol, you didn't do anything. You know, it was our fault. I'm just so sorry. Will you forgive me? And she said yes. And I was thrilled after that. But bullying is very deep, and it sometimes stays with people and ruins their lives. And as we read, we know that some people commit suicide. So, so gender and bullying and bigotry is all wound together in my head. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Do you think that, like, if someone was, 2 people were born and, like, raised without any sort of sexism around them at all, do you think it would just occur naturally in their brains to put, like, a woman beneath them or a man above them?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Now, there are sex differences. Men are physically stronger, but there are some women that are physically stronger than men. And if we look at kids up until, I don't know what age, there must be some psychologists in this room. I don't know whether it's 3 or 4. There really aren't much of a difference. You know, the boys play with the girls and goes back and forth. But maybe at 3, I don't know. Anyone know more than me? When does pink and blue come into being?
It's much earlier.
How old?
Pre-K.
Pre-K.
I don't know if it was always that way, but in recent years it has been.
Right. Well, you know, I read recently that pink used to be a boy's color. So, I mean, the whole thing is so stupid. It's just, you know. And then you have loads and loads of men who are afraid to wear pink because some marketing guy decided pink was for girls and blue was for boys. So I don't think we're born with this bigotry inside. It's sad. Anything else? Shall we go to our wonderful performers now? I think, but please, before we stop, please fill out the gender forms. You don't even have to put on your name. It could be completely anonymous.
Well,
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I promise you, if you hang out for just a couple more minutes, and many hands, and I have many hands here tonight to make light work, if you could help me by, as you get up and move around the gallery, we have some food outside. Could you perhaps take a bench with you, grab a partner, and we can make short work of this? And then in about 5 minutes, we're going to have a performance Stein gig right here for you to see. Please stick around for that. It's going to be awesome. That was really